Hello, I'm Justin Pulliam. I have some breaking news to bring you today. There was a police shooting in Leon Valley, Texas. That's where Police Chief Joe Salvaggio is under intense scrutiny after a series of incidents of excessive force over the past several years. Those videos are well documented on this channel if you want to watch the Leon Valley playlist, which I have in the video description.
These are not officers who put their knees on people's necks. And what the officers have expressed to me, which scares me to death, is that they find themselves hesitating now. And I don't want them to hesitate. I want them to follow the policy and follow what they learned. Our policies are good and they're solid and they meet what the movement is asking for. And I don't want our officers to feel like they're doing anything wrong. And so when they don't do anything wrong, and they're in fear of losing their jobs, or they're in fear, that they might hesitate to conduct an arrest or to do something, that scares me. I don't want an officer killed on duty because they hesitate, period.
Leon Valley officers opened fire on a driver early this morning. It occurred on Peachtree Street in Leon Valley, about a mile away from John Marshall High School. The driver is reported to be a 28-year-old Hispanic male. Multiple television stations are reporting various details about the event. The information purportedly comes from Chief Salvaggio himself. Salvaggio has not provided any comments or information to Justin Pulliam at this time. Purportedly, the traffic stop initiated shortly before 3 a.m. It was a suspected drunk driver. Supposedly, there were 3 officers on scene when this happened. That's relatively unique because if it was a fresh stop, there would not be 3 officers there. That tells me this probably went on for quite a bit of time, with more officers from Leon Valley arriving, managing only to escalate the situation into catastrophe. Leon Valley police say that one officer is in stable condition but facing a broken leg after being run over by the vehicle. Initially, they were saying only 1 officer fired. Now, some people are reporting that 2 officers fired. Let's go through some of the reports coming out of San Antonio this morning. I want to emphasize that this information, much of it is not in quotes. It's just paraphrased, I guess, from the police chief. There's a lot of bias that I've noted thrown in, things that you couldn't possibly know, but basically framing it in the pro-police mindset we so often see from the local media outlets. KSAT 12 reports that Leon Valley police shoot driver after he allegedly, that's good. That's good. When it's coming out of Leon Valley, especially Police Chief Joe Salvaggio's mouth, things should be allegedly. After he allegedly ran over driver. And let's compare that to their previous headline, man shot by police after running officer over with vehicle, Leon Valley police say. That's the same article. If you click on it, it goes to this page that I have up. KSAT says, according to Salvaggio, officers thought the driver was possibly intoxicated and then pulled him over. That's notable because I think you might see some stories, especially earlier, saying that the man did not stop for police. He says soon after the driver refused to cooperate, and it wasn't long before things turned especially violent. Well, that certainly sounds like Salvaggio. But which is it? Was it not long or was it long? Because this is actually in quotes, so presumably Salvaggio really said this next part. They tried to talk for him for quite a bit through the window. So what was it? Was it not long or was it quite a bit? Which was it? Take a pick. He wouldn't roll his window down, and then he eventually did, Salvaggio said. Then, as they were talking to him, they decided to try to arrest him. The door came open, and then he intentionally reversed it and ran over the officer.
They tried to talk to him for quite a bit through the window. It wouldn't roll his window down, and then eventually did. And then as they're talking to him, decided to try to arrest him. The door came open, and he intentionally reversed it and ran over the officer.
This is classic Salvaggio. The door came open, so the officers opened the door? Did the driver open the door? Did the door suffer the catastrophic safety latch failure right then and there? Salvaggio in his rhetoric. And then, according to Salvaggio, a second officer fired shots that hit the man. And he was hit at least a couple of times. Both were taken to a local hospital with what the chief described as non-life-threatening injuries. Interesting. Let's go on to the next one. KENS 5 has a completely different story on this part. They say Leon Valley Chief of Police Joe Salvaggio said that the suspect's condition is unknown at this time, but that they were shot in the chest. Quote, so it's probably serious, critical, but unknown at this time. Again, let's compare that to KSAT 12, where the chief described as non-life-threatening injuries. KENS 5 shot some B-roll on scene, but honestly, theirs is not terribly useful unless you just like looking at red and blue strobe lights. Fox San Antonio got the best video on scene, and I'll show you a few clips of that in a second. They also heard from Salvaggio their reports as, according to Leon Valley Police Chief Joe Salvaggio, 3 officers pulled over a suspect just before 3 a.m. The suspect refused to roll down his window, instead putting it in reverse and running over one of the officers. Wow! Another completely different narrative out of Salvaggio. Who knows what the heck happened here? We're going to get into the video, though, where I'm going to point out some things that just don't quite make sense to me. Salvaggio says that the officer was dragged until the other 2 fired shots at the suspect, stopping him. Wait, so now other 2, not just 1, but 2 of them shot, and he was being dragged until the officer shot. Salvaggio said that the 2 officers who opened fire have been with the department for approximately 3 years. This is the Fox San Antonio video from the scene. I want to point out some inconsistencies that I see right off the top. Salvaggio says that the door came open and then the driver put the car in reverse. The officer ran over, but then we're also hearing that the officer was dragged by the vehicle. We're getting various reports about what happened. Again, these are all reports that came from Salvaggio himself, reportedly. Allegedly. Who knows? So if the door came open and the officer was caught up in the vehicle and the vehicle was going backwards, that would make me think, the officer's coming in to get the driver, that the officer would have been caught up on this driver's side door and is being pushed backwards by the vehicle, according the best you can make out of Salvaggio's story, if indeed the car was in reverse. And then we're to believe that the officers stood down, maybe about right over here, and were shooting from the passenger side of the vehicle at the driver, and reportedly the officer is being dragged at the time, which could really only be by the open window, and the other 2 officers are shooting that way? That doesn't make sense. And then look where the car ended up. It's on the sidewalk. Did they start off in the front yard? How did it reverse onto the sidewalk? Let's look at their video a little bit and then look at some pictures.
Down their window.
So you can see there the bumper damage where the car looks like it stopped by going forward into that mailbox. But look at this here. Look at all these bullet holes. I count 8 pretty conservatively, and that's not even including all of this mess here on the passenger window. And I also noticed, look how tight that grouping is right there at the bottom of that windshield. And their story is that officers were shooting while this driver was moving and dragging an officer who could have only been, I guess, being on the driver's side, and that's where the officers are. Look, this is not adding up. Already I showed you 3 different reports, all coming from Salvaggio. They're inconsistent. Look what KSAT 12 had to say about this. They called that several bullet holes in the windshield and passenger side window. Here's a picture from Fox San Antonio. It looks like both of the passenger tires are flat, and there is damage to the back bumper. Looking at this more, really nothing out of Leon Valley makes any sense in here. You can clearly see that the passenger side portion of the front bumper is damaged. Yet in this picture, we see that there is no damage to the front bumper there. and it's quite a few feet away from that mailbox. Salvaggio isn't releasing any names of the officers. He won't say who fired the shots. He won't say who was allegedly run over. But from experience, I know that some of the night shift officers, again, I don't know who was working last night, but some of the Leon Valley night shift officers include Trevino, Flores, Grego, De Leon. In fact, you can watch many of those officers at the city council meetings, including at the meeting where they arrested Olin Yarnell at 2 a.m. after a city council meeting where he questioned the city administration. The San Antonio Police Department was also on scene at this incident. I'll be requesting all of the information and video. I can't trust anything the chief and those officers say without seeing the video. It leaves only a lot of questions, and already, how could these multiple officers arrive to the scene and only end up escalating it into what happened? Besides letting you know about this breaking news, I wanted to use these various reports as a way to demonstrate to you how so often the media outlets are all over the place when it comes to facts and details about a story. This is something I learned over a decade ago as I was interviewing with reporters, and I realized that almost every time there is at least something, if not multiple things, reported and or written or said on TV that just weren't exactly correct. And here you can see how pretty much every station got things differently. It's one reason why you'll almost always see my videos come out a bit later as I try to get closer to the truth about what happened instead of throwing up content for the sensationalist media cycle. And so I have some updates. I noticed that KSAT uploaded a video of the officer who was injured. That's interesting that it took him so long to be transported to the hospital that the video cameras were already rolling when he was being put on the stretcher and loaded up in the ambulance. You can see the stripes there on his sleeve. That's Corporal Louis Farias. He is someone who you may have seen before when Mark Brown, Tucson Police Suck, was tased in Leon Valley. They tasered him because they said that he had fallen on top of Farias, and also in the incident where people were arrested, a smaller mass arrest, but when they had the flag in the outside the door of the Leon Valley City Hall, Farias was one of the people who made the arrest there and also the author of that lie report.
There you go, ma'am. Letter for you. Sorry, ma'am. Have a good day.
You're under arrest for obstructing the highway. Get back.
Okay.
Get back now.
Okay.
Hold on. Stop. Over here. All y'all witnesses to the crime. All y'all witnesses to the crime. What are you doing? So we're confiscating your camera. You have a witness to a crime. You're being a lawful order. Turn around. What are you doing? Camera's evidence of crime. Understand? We're seizing your camera for evidence. For what? For evidence. Why? Evidence of a crime. Let go.
Finally, and unfortunately, I have from a reliable source that the driver has been pronounced deceased. So this was a fatal shooting. Going forward, we can expect the Texas Rangers to get involved, and who knows what they might find when they start asking questions in Leon Valley. I have more Leon Valley videos coming out today. In fact, I'm going to use up all of my notifications on this channel. So be sure to subscribe and enable all notifications here if you'd like to see those other videos, and subscribe to Justin Pulliam Live so you know of any other breaking Leon Valley news that occurs today. Thank you for watching, and always record the police.